And how does that relate to regenerative ag and soil health? And
Mhm,
then I want to understand and unpack it, because there's always a story behind, you know, there's
mhm.
always a story.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yes. So as I mentioned earlier, there's definitely growing evidence that there's a correlation between increased soil health and increased carbon drawdown or
Hmm.
carbon sequestration
Hmm.
that happens. And so people like John Wick in Marin County have
Hmm.
coined the term carbon farming,
Hmm.
and I for one believe that that is a real phenomenon that is happening, and the studies are starting to come in to support it. And so what that's setting off is a lot of activity that, as you might suspect, is coming from Wall Street and other places where they're seeing an opportunity. It's not to say that their intentions are horrible, at the outset, because they're
Hmm.
interested in how we can advance through market mechanisms, the
Right.
adoption
We need a
of
lot of
anything
dough to scale.
anything that will help climate change urgently is needed, and I'm a fan. I'm
Right.
just where I'm jumping the gun, or what I'm jumping to, is that what I'm fearful of is that that finance people in New York will determine how the risk is priced and who will benefit from these carbon credits and carbon
That's
markets.
what they
And,
do.
and typically, the
Yeah.
farmer is left holding the bag with holding all the risk, and then is sort of finagled out of any real benefit, or if not all at once, over time.
Hmm.
In favor of the middle persons who are skimming as much as they can, including funds and others that are juicing their returns by building in these in my mind, very, very speculative carbon credit values at this point. Now, I don't doubt there are lots of smart, well-intentioned people working on it. I'm just, if you look at history, you can see that that it's problematic what happens when the financial services industry, puts itself as the arbiter of like how all this works.
Especially, what did I hear the other day? I just went to a conference in Philadelphia, Impact PHL, and I learned 92% of the equity in the US is owned by white households, and 98% of asset managers are white men.
Mhm.
So it's a little scary about like who's making all of these decisions, and have folks actually been on a farm?
Indeed, yeah. Whole nother hour if we want to get into racial equity and justice, as part of this. But there's no question what
But
you
help
said.
me understand though, how does the carbon credit,
Huh.
it, 30-second, overview of carbon credit, how does that work?
Well, you've got big tech companies. They're using an enormous amount of energy.
Yeah.
You've got other airlines. The classic folks who are using a lot of energy,
Mhm.
and not finding a clear way to within their own operations to kind of true that up and
Mhm.
balance that out. They then need to turn to the offset or the credit market,
Mhm.
carbon credit market. And so the increased soil health resulting in the increased carbon drawdown, to the degree that that can be measured accurately and reliably,
Mhm.
then translates into value for to a Google or a Microsoft, to kind of
Mhm.
cover all the energy that's being used by their servers.
Mhm. And when you say accurately measured, let's just talk about that for a second, and then I promise we'll get to finance. But accurately measure, my understanding is, whether it's carbon sequestration or you name it, it's super expensive to actually, or it was, I don't know, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. It was super expensive to evaluate the carbon sequestration in soil or whatever method you're looking at. And it almost, takes away from the actual benefit or the financial benefit, whether that's to the farmer or to whomever.
Yes.
Have things improved or not, or, is that a big holdback?
In my mind, it's incredibly complex
Yeah.
and complicated.
Yeah.
It's not like you can't draw across examples from renewable energy, for example, where you're working with steel and solar panels
Yeah.
and this guy by crop, by soil type, by
Okay.
geography, by type of practices, by different places in a particular farm
Mhm.
property,
Mhm.
and microclimates. There's so much complexity there,
Uh,
and then you get into what is able to be gamed,
mhm.
which is just it's highly problematic and kind of full of holes for the moment. Yeah.
I guess my question so the science is not a barrier. The science exists, the science is true, the science,
I would say we're getting there. I would say that there's only starting to be really reliable direct correlation between increased soil health and carbon sequestration. But
and who's leading that research? I'm curious. Are there
there are lots of folks. I mentioned Jonathan Lundgren as an
yeah,
early researcher in this. He's former U.S. government, now at South Dakota State. But there are Cornell, UC Davis, a lot
yeah,
of the ag universities
sure.
that historically have been part of the conventional ag
Uh-huh.
paradigm are now getting really serious about this issue.
That's great.
And then there are others as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah. No, no,
The
no.
Googles of the world are working on this very hard as well, as you might imagine.
Yeah. The let's dive into the finances. So, okay, so we talked about soil health, we talked about farms and issues there, but the margins are still pretty thin on farms.
Hmm.
And those folks work really hard.
Indeed.
And so maybe it's a great space for describing rePlant and how you actually support farmers and support soil health,
Hmm.
and who else is out there.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're looking at addressing that 99%. So we're working with the big food companies as our partners. So Danone North America is our
Mhm.
first primary partner,
Mhm.
and we're working in their dairy and their almond supply chains to
Mhm.
work with their basically biggest and best farmers. So
Mhm.
Danone has over 770 dairy farmers in the United States.
Mhm.
The top 15 represent about 40% of all their milk production, and they're about 1 billion pounds of milk per year. And so that's where we're starting is to work with those, within the top 15, who are the farmers that have the most conviction, that
Mhm.
want to make this transition, and they
Mhm.
have forward contracts with Danone to
Okay. Yeah.
guarantee their offtake. And so that has
Okay.
a risk mitigation
Sure.
effect for us that's appealing, and makes kind of a lot of the assumptions around our fund make sense. We have rePlant has one product offering at this point. It's called the Soil Fund,
Okay.
and it's to support these farmers who are making this transition. So to help them acquire land that may have been degraded for it's maybe adjacent to their existing farm,
Mhm.
it may have been degraded for decades,
Mhm.
and they're converting it to regenerative and organic. So that's there may be equipment that they need in order irrigation systems or
Mhm.
tractors and harvesters that have less compaction, or we're helping refinance sometimes these farms, because that's one of the key parts of the financial equation is that historically farmers have been paying way too high of interest rates. You think that they are getting a great deal from the
Right.
government,
USDA
farm
funding
farm
of some
farm credit,
sort, or yeah.
yeah, the farm credit system,
Right.
or and in some cases that's true. In many cases they're paying way more than they should, and so what we're offering are lower interest rates, a streamlined kind of loan agreement
Yeah.
process,
Yeah.
and less bureaucracy and less time to
Mhm.
engage with us before they get the money, in addition to technical assistance that helps them make this transition.
And
That's
so
basically what we're doing. Yeah.
are you underwriting their future contract or their future receivables?
We're underwriting two things. One is the nature of the relationship that they have with their off-taker, their buyer, like Danone. Uh,
Right. And that to me is a huge risk mitigating factor, because as long as
Indeed.
they're in that network, I would imagine Denome is going to acquire those products
Danone has long-term contracts that go out 8, 10, 15 years
Hmm.
in some cases. And so I think that that's not only really smart on their part, but it's
Hmm.
also good for the farmer. And
Hmm.
they're not looking to capture the farmer. The farmer
Hmm.
can sell
Yeah.
to others if they'd like. So that's a big part of it. And then we'll take, conventional collateral where there's a land acquisition loan that we're making as an example. So that's basically what we're trying to do is make projects happen that the farmer is thinking, I'd really like to do this for XYZ set of reasons. I'd like to
Hmm.
actually attract my kids to come back to the farm, and this is something that they're badgering me about.
Hmm.
That's actually not a small factor.
I would
Um,
imagine that's significant.
I'd like to, meet the market and
Yeah.
be a leader in this field and capture better economics, for myself.
Yeah.
And I'd like to do it for the intrinsic merits of having a healthier world and better soil, because from my experience in meeting these bigger farmers, they're not factory foremen. They not that's bad. I'm just saying that they see themselves as land stewards, even
Hmm.
if they've been using a agrochemical program, and they would like to get off it if they could. They just with the things like pests and things like
Hmm.
they
Hmm.
want to they need to do things to address their risk. So
Hmm.
the timing is such that the practices and the support can be brought to bear to help them make this transition, and the financial part is one piece of it. So offering lower interest rates, more streamlined process, technical assistance, it helps them say yes to doing
Hmm. Hmm.
projects. And that's what Danone wants to see as well.
That's great. And I like the idea of going with the 99%
Mhm.
versus like, okay, so these actors are good and doing their thing and whatever, and they're regenerative, and how do we scale them or whatever. It sounds like other maybe CDFIs or other
Indeed.
companies.
RSF. I mean, like, we're one
Yeah,
of the biggest funders of food hubs for 7 or 8 years. They're regional food system hubs. And I'm rooting for all that to
right,
continue to happen. Wendell Berry might be horrified with the scale that we're working on.
right.
I've just said to myself, it's a both and situation. We have to bring all theories of change to bear on this, whether it's for the soil or for the carbon aspect.
Yeah, it reminds me of the idea of divesting from whatever Shell oil, or trying to load up on Shell oil and putting people on the board.
Yes.
So it sounds like your kind of strategy too.
Yes.
Um, okay, so let's talk about a transaction. So I'm still trying to understand. Give me a sample story.
Yeah. I'll do two real quick, and
Yeah,
I won't name the actual
sure,
borrowers.
of course.
So they're both in the so one's in the Danone supply chain, one of their largest dairy farmers in the United States in Idaho, and they wanted to acquire 6,880 acres of land adjacent to their existing land, just as I spoke of earlier. It's severely degraded. They'd like to convert. They want to have. They're going to have 1,000 acres of it devoted to irrigated cropland, corn, alfalfa, wheat,
Hmm.
for feedstock for the dairy cows, and then the rest they're going to manage we're working with them to manage in a regenerative way using holistic management methods that for the rangeland for beef cattle.
Okay, so hang on one
Yeah.
second. So is rePlant Capital then providing that technical assistance, or are you guys?
We're bringing the technical
Yeah.
assistance to them. So
Okay.
we have deep networks
Yeah.
in various parts of the food
Yeah.
and ag world, and so we're introducing them to people. And in the covenants of these loans, we're stipulating that in order to qualify for these lower rates and to work with us, you'll be, in this case, 1,000 acres of the land is going to be certified organic, and the rest will be regenerative.
Mhm.
And so we are, what we're doing is saying that there are certain practices that we know you want to adopt
Mhm.
anyway. I mean, we're not
Mhm.
out there browbeating people into this. We're saying, if
Mhm.
you're inclined to do this anyway, we'll help you, kind of thing. So there are practices, and then there are outcomes, that we're
Mhm.
shooting towards,
Mhm.
and that all goes into the docs so that we, our investors, Danone, others,
Mhm.
can all be on the same page. So that's kind of the nature of the agreements
And
of the
so
farm.
you have in your loan docs pollinator health.
Indeed. I
What
mean,
does that look like?
it depends. It depends on what the
Sure,
outcomes are that the particular farmer. Obviously, it's different working with potato growers in
sure, okay.
in Maine
And the almonds or
and
whatever, yeah.
almonds in California. But we are looking at the quantifying it is tricky, and I'll just be totally honest that we're kind of feeling our way into the best ways to do it.
Sure,
But we are naming outcomes that need to be there across, and we're not saying that they need to be there after year 1
right,
or year 3. I mean, this is something we're very upfront with our investors about, is that like with agriculture, again, you don't just like wave a wand or turn a switch and it happens. And so it's going out, 5, 8 years or more as a transition really has the time to, and this is after, a couple of years of consulting with a lot of not just farmers, but technical assistance providers and others who are soil scientists and what have you. It takes time for this to happen, but so we're allowing for that. But given that, we're saying, we all want, Danone, the farmer, us, we all want to see these outcomes. So let's agree to direction what we're pointing towards. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Don, I'm sure we could continue this conversation for hours and hours. Super helpful though. How does one learn more about the fund? Remind me, what is the fund name again? And
Yeah,
the website?
so replantcapital.com.
Okay.
And the fund is called the Soil Fund.
Yeah.
And it's easy to find information on that as well. And
Great.
then I'm Don at replantcap.com.
You have it. Last question. What is the structure of rePlant? You're not a CDFI?
We are not. No, we're a public benefit corporation at
Yeah.
the mothership level. And then the fund is a public benefit LLC.
Yeah. And then will you have other funds underneath that at some point?
Indeed. Yeah. The broader picture for rePlant is that will be a fund management company, and the soil fund will basically be like the foundational trust layer. And then on top of that, we'll be looking at things like infrastructure, ag tech. We're going to have a front row seat basically once we have hundreds of these farmers who are working with us in the soil fund, to then be in better position to know what their other needs are. Yeah.
Well, I feel better now. I got a little scared with the 50-year horizon. I don't know if I'll be here in 50 years, but I do feel better that folks like you and others are out there and thinking about this and investing in our future. So thanks for spending time with me today, Don.
Thanks so much, Mark. Appreciate it.
All right. Have a good one.
You too. Do well.